Hello and welcome to the first episode of Season 3. We are back with the Paragliding Debrief. I'm super excited to be back. As always, we've had a winter layoff while I've been away doing my long haul trips. But we are back and we have an incredibly entertaining season coming up. We've got some of the biggest names in paragliding coming to join us, and our first episode will be a cracker. We've got Alex Schweig and Tommy Short joining us in the studio. We have recorded this one live from, well, not live, but we've recorded it from Peru, where I was with them doing a trip, one of the first European guided trips. We're going to hear from Tommy Schwartz about what life was like in the very early days of paragliding in Venezuela, what it was like to be one of the original acro pilots competing and flying and developing new tricks alongside the SAT team, Raul Rodriguez or Rafael Lorenz, and the SAT team, Richard Gallon. We're going to talk to Alex about what it's like representing your country in PWC, the Paragliding World Cup. And basically about what it's like to come from South America and involve yourself in the world of paragliding. Some incredibly interesting topics that these two cover, and some really interesting and very comical stories. I love these two to bits. We've got a great relationship. We are obsessed with The Never-Ending Thermal. So for any of you who've seen The Never-Ending Thermal, a cult classic film that came out in the early 2000s. If you've not seen it, I recommend you to do so. There are a lot of quotes. So if you wonder why we're wandering off with a lot of quotations and laughing in this one, it is all based around our love of the absolute cult classic Never-Ending Thermal. So sit back, relax, and join us for our first episode of Season 3 in the Paragliding Debrief. Okay, here we are. We're sat in Lima. I'm sat in Lima with Alex Schweig and Tommy Schwartz. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning, Lima.
Good morning. We are on the air. Estamos en vivo, papi.
We've been trying to do this for a couple of weeks, but we've been incredibly busy. We've been here doing the first, I believe, European guided trip to Peru.
Yes.
It's been a busy couple of weeks, non-stop, really.
Yeah, it has. It's been a year in the planning, and we've finally done it. There's loads I want to talk about today. One of the main things will be about that, the fact that you two have managed to start to open up Peru as a paragliding pilot tourist destination. And after the last 2 weeks of what I've seen, I think this is not going to be the first time that the pilots travel to this area. So I'd like to talk a little bit about that, and then I want to delve deep into the background of you two, because you two have some incredibly interesting stories. But Peru, gentlemen. I mean, Alex, you're from Peru? You're from Lima?
Born and raised in Lima.
It's where you learned to fly? Mm-hmm. In Miraflores?
I actually learned further down the coast at another takeoff, which was where all the people who weren't allowed to take off from Miraflores because of diverse reasons ended up getting kicked down to.
Yeah. And there's quite, I've noticed while we've been here, there's quite a strong community of pilots here.
Yeah, the flying community is super active, super colorful. There's a really nice brotherhood going on.
Yeah. And Lima's featured. I mean, I remember 15, 16 years ago, seeing pictures and videos of people flying in front of Lima with the backdrop of this city. I mean, it's when you see it in real life, it's an incredibly amazing thing to see, amazing thing to do. There's not many places in the world that you can fly with an incredibly famous, huge backdrop of a city like Lima. And yet, having said that, although it's been on the front cover of Cross Country magazine, the BHPA magazine in the UK, French magazine, I mean, it's been all over the place. It's featured in videos. There aren't actually, or from my knowledge, there haven't been that many groups of people or pilots that have come to visit Lima. And until you boys have kind of started doing your tours and started opening it up. So how can such a famous place have been so, not ignored is the wrong word, but how come before do you think there hasn't been so many pilots coming? What's made the difference now for you boys to be able to start bringing people here, to start showing them in real life, you know, putting the picture of the magazines or the videos and stuff into real life?
Yeah, even though we have a bunch of really, really nice flying sites, the biggest issue with Peru, even though it's a friendly country for tourists, is that for the flying, there is some insider knowledge that's needed. The logistics of it are tricky for some of the flying sites, and that's where we step in and provide that very necessary guidance.
Yeah. And you were flying here for a long time as a tandem pilot, which I believe, Tommy, that's how you came to be in Lima. You're from Venezuela?
Yes, I am from Venezuela. So, and started flying there about 28 years ago.
28 years ago, so back in the day when it was all started.
In 95. And I was basically learned all my flying there till I went to Europe and to study engineering. And that's where I was studying in Munich, and I suddenly felt that Munich was still too far away from the Alps, and I decided to quit that studies. I had already studied management, and that's why I went to Bassano to fly in order to be able to fly more. And yeah, long story, trying to make it short. Somehow, I after Bassano, I ended up working with Firebird, paragliding manufacturer from that time. They ended up probably working 20 years ago.
They were a big company back then. Like,
Yeah.
For me, as I was coming into the sport, they were still a brand.
Yes.
Coming to the kind of end of their tenure.
Yeah.
But back in the day, they were a brand that you would associate now, for example, Advance or Ozone. Some of the big brands, Gin, BGD, Firebird were a big brand back then.
Yes, exactly. And for some reasons that I heard, or I may know or not know the real reasons, there were some that they closed it down. Yes, just before that, I decided to go back to Venezuela because I was missing it so much. But decided to work in tourism. That's how I started an adventure travel company, and that was in Venezuela. And we also were offering tandem flights as well as guided tours to the Table Mountains, to the jungle, river, boat tours, and mostly adventurous stuff. That was our offer. And the time passed by. I was so happy to be back in Venezuela because I love Venezuela, but the political situation is making it more difficult for me and for people to live there. And that's how I landed in Peru. And I wanted to expand a little bit and start working from Peru as well. And came over to Lima and joined the Association of Paragliding, Tandem Pilots, and started working here. That's where I met my bro Alex.
Where the brotherhood started.
Funnily enough, I kind of saw a role model in Tommy. I met him when I was a fresh pilot. I hadn't been flying for long, and we kind of followed a similar life story, even though it was maybe unplanned. So I also started studying mechanical engineering, ended up moving to Europe also for flying. So in the end, meeting somebody who was just as geeky and nerdy as I was and had a similar path kind of showed me the way, even though it was completely unplanned.
I think it was the moment where we started quoting the same movies. We all like Zoolander movies or Never Ending Thermal. It's like, oh my god, this guy is cool. It was probably also the same thing when we met you, Lee, last summer.
Everybody in this room is pulling out Never Ending Thermal quotes all the time, and I think that's the secret code to joining the Brotherhood.
That's exactly how I fell in love with you guys. I came to Gallitzin, met you guys in Gallitzin. We were working in the same tandem team. And before I knew you guys, Never Ending Thermal was a movie that changed my life. When I gave up my old life, I gave up my old job. I went to meet this guy in a paragliding school. I had no clue what paragliding was about. And he said, look, you've got 2 weeks to decide. Take this video, take these magazines, go home, watch this DVD, Never Ending Thermal, read through the magazines. If you really think it's something you want to do, you're welcome on board and you can change your life. So I went home, watched Never Ending Thermal, and that was it. I want to do that. I even years later, I bought a camper van very similar to their camper van. Went to June de P. I started doing the same routes they were doing. It was an inspirational movie for my time. And me and my old instructor, Akis, would constantly just talk in Never Ending Thermal quotes.
Yeah, for me, it was a bit of a guiding North Star. I saw it very early on in my flying, since I am a bit of a self-taught pilot. I never actually did a paragliding course, so to say, because I started when I was 15. I had no money at the time to actually pay for a course. And so a ton of the information for me in the early days just came from YouTube and finding films online. And Never Ending Thermal became a kind of an inspiration of somebody who didn't have all the chances that the European pilots had, but then made it all the way to Europe and kind of made his way into the scene.
Yeah. Meeting you guys in the cable car going up, and you started saying Never Ending Thermal quotes. Oh no, I find my incredible. For some people listening now who might not even know what Never Ending Thermal was, it was one of the first full production paragliding movies. And if you've not seen it, just go on YouTube, go online, search Never Ending Thermal. It's a fantastic film. And both of you have said then, so a lot of the perception in Europe is a paragliding. It did start in Europe, but it was in Europe and then spread out years later across the world. But actually, 1995, that was in the early days of flying. So there was paragliding all around the world. It wasn't just in Europe that this thing was happening. In Peru as well. I mean, how long's paragliding been going on here?
I've heard of flying in the early 90s here for sure.
Yeah.
Early 90s, yes, because when I remember when I started flying, for me, paragliding was already there, and I think it had more time for me. Well, I because when I was 14 or something, already my father mentioned that he wanted to make the course, and I want to make it too. No, when you're 18, you have to wait. No, but I want to make it. I want to make it. So I was already, I became in touch with the whole scene some days, years earlier. So for some reason, for me, it doesn't feel like, it was not the earliest days, because I saw older gliders, and when I was starting, the modern gliders, they fly. I don't think we can push. Everybody is saying we cannot push the performance stuff further. With those old gliders, can you imagine that?
I feel like this phrase gets thrown out every 10 years and then it's completely blown out of the water by some new technology.
Absolutely. We're still saying it now. They were saying it then. And where did it come from? Was it European instructors coming, or how did it land in Venezuela? How did it land in Peru? Do you know where it came from? The instructors in those days were Venezuelan, were Peruvian, were they Europeans bringing it over? Do you know?
I feel like I've heard stories about somebody bringing these 8 or 11 cell gliders as far back as 88 here. I think it was some European guys for sure. Franz Schilter, one of the best Peruvian pilots, cross-country pilots, has been flying. I think he brought it over from Switzerland as well. He now runs a very successful hotel business in Cusco. So yeah, it was definitely brought over from Europe, and I guess back in those days you did 10 flights and you could teach people, because there was not really much to learn.
Yeah, if you're more experienced, you can teach the next person. They're more experienced, and so it goes on. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so, Alex, as is quite a common story for a lot of people, it's an expensive sport to get into. Generally, people find it when they're quite young, and some people have had to almost teach themselves, or there's a group of friends all teaching themselves. That's kind of how it went back in the day. And then from there, you've developed yourself now into a very talented acro pilot, tandem pilot. You fly in the PWC. How did that progression go for you, sort of growing up in the sport, making it from a hobby into more of a profession?
Very early on, I noticed that it wasn't really just a hobby. So I have a bit of an obsessive personality. Whenever I get into something, it really completely occupies my thoughts. And at the beginning, I was very lucky to kind of avoid paying for equipment or avoid paying for a course. At the beginning, I could rely on just being a bothersome little fat kid and asking people for gear and just asking too many questions. And that was the source of much of my flying at the beginning. So I can say it's been an extremely long way. It's been half of my life almost by now. Much of it I can thank to the fact that people were willing to lend me equipment. There was a pilot here who owned a bunch of equipment with advertisement on it, and I got to fly that for the first couple of years of my flying, because otherwise I wouldn't have had my own gear. Some of the local schools allowed me to buy gear and pay it off slowly, doing diverse jobs as I did before when I was still in school. So it's been a very long way, and I can say the first years of my flying were really just playing on the coast and getting the basics down, and that's the fact that I've taken it so slowly, I feel like has helped me develop safely. In some ways it's been difficult to keep the motivation up after so much time. I feel like motivation is like a houseplant. You have to take care of it, you have to water it, you cannot give it too much sunlight, you have to take care of this finite resource that is easy to overdo.
And while you were training, in the back of your mind, were you working? Now you're flying in top level competitions. Was that always your plan? Or as you got better, it just seemed to fall into place? Or did you have a burning ambition to you represent Peru in the top level competitions?
No, it all just seemed to happen. It all just seemed to fall into place. Cross country was always in the back of my mind, like how interesting. Maybe that's something I'll do when I'm older. Because it does seem to be a more mature pilot kind of thing. But it kind of just happened, and that's all very recent. I dedicated most of my flying to freestyle or acro, or really just playing around and having fun with a glider and close to the ground, playing on a dune or playing in Paracas, the spot that we visited barely a week ago, is really what I'm best at and what I enjoy the most. So all of this far away from the ground flying is really a very recent thing.
Yeah, and I've really noticed that here. On the launch yesterday in Miraflores, in front of Lima, the local pilots here are so good at the ground handling, are so good at the low flying kind of thing. The glider skills and the glider control, again, down in Paracas, down in Huacachina, seeing how good the guys are with gliders, the guys that are playing at launching, at skimming the sand, it makes a massive difference to how you fly when you're away from the ground. If you have that level of glider control, and it's the same, there's no surprise when you talk to people like Theo de Blick, who we had on recently, Jack Pimblett, Luc de Voort, they all started at a fairly young age and they did years of ground handling, ground skimming, playing close to the ground. Was it the same for you, Tommy?
When learning in Venezuela, not necessarily, because we fly generally more mountainous areas, which is similar to probably what Europeans or maybe other parts of the world happen. We did, however, have when I also started quite young, and I was also like this fever of if I'm not flying and I still have some wind, I will be kiting on the ground. And but yes, for us it was still in some moments forwards launching and or backwards launching, and yes, the same applied. I thought, I was always practicing a lot, but it was funny when I arrived in Peru, and I saw people are masters. I see the how do you say that, el promedio, the average Peruvian pilot is pretty good, more than average than the rest of the world, or probably windy flying sites. And I was telling him, how come sometimes Peru is very particular, because you go from very easy flying sites here at the coast to very tough flying at the Andes. So it's the intermediate is maybe Pacha, where we're going today, but they haven't. I'm happy, for example, to see Alex doing very good outside. You have Franz Schelter is a Swiss pilot that is basically a Peruvian living in Peru, but you don't see that sometimes many Peruvian pilots on like high level competitions. But I have always told them, guys, if they do a ground handling world competition, the Peruvians would be really
on the podium.
Sure,
exactly.
From what I saw yesterday and I've seen over the last 2 weeks, undoubtedly so.
Exactly. So I'm happy to see more and more Peruvian pilots also going out and
in Peru there's no intermediate. Either you get really, really nice chill flying at the coast, or you go straight to expedition style flying in the Andes. There's no in between. Because the Andes rise up so steeply behind the coast, there's no wide open green valleys. It's either narrow coastal valleys, or just a few hours behind the coast you're already at 4,000 plus meters, and then it becomes Pakistan, Nepal style flying. It's very serious flying.
And like we've just said, Alex, you're a very talented acro pilot. I fly acro. We're lucky. We're in the modern day of acro, where the wings have been developed a lot more. I mean, when we started, it wasn't so. But in comparison to you, Tommy, I mean, you've got such an interesting story. You were doing acro back in the day when it had just started. You were doing some of the first there's a great scene in Never Ending Thermal. And again, guys, if you watch it, you can spot Tommy. He's on the blue glider with the yellow acro written down. It was one of the kind of first versions of an acro glider. And it pops up in the movie.
There's this amazing scene where Tommy, I think you wanted to pull a McTwist, and he ends up tumbling 20 meters over the water. And right before he hits the water, you just see his little feet wriggling upside down in the air.
Guys, you've got to check it out. It's fantastic. So you were around. You were one of the early day acro pilots at the same time as kind of the SAT team with Raul, Felix, Horacio was forming, Mike Kung, the original group. How was it? Because acro was just something that was experimental back in the day. The tricks are still being learned. How did you get into it? How did you end up being with that initial group of acro pilots? I mean, you've helped to develop the sport.
Yeah, so it was interesting. I always enjoyed doing wingovers. When I was in Venezuela, we were doing, acro is just wingovers. I'm doing a SAT, a looping, or a stall. So when I went to Europe, I was then flying in Italy and then Germany. I was doing for example, we had problems in Bassano. I had a friend, Marcos Luger, he was like more of a rebel. He was doing his acro, and people were kicking him out because it was forbidden to do acro in Bassano. I claim to be, I was smarter because I did my acro somewhere behind the mountain where nobody could see me, and that's where I had no problems with any authorities. But I really didn't. I was watching. We went to Red Bull Vertigo in Villeneuve. Whoa, the big stars, and it was funny.
Who were the big stars back then? Who were the big stars?
Of course, there was Raúl Rodríguez, Felix, Horacio. There was Horacio, Hernán Pitoco, and who else was there?
Richard Gallon.
Richard Gallon, yeah, of course, yeah. And those were even before I went to Europe. So it was I was not even in the first part of the development of the acro scene, and in Italy I started developing it even more in Bassano secretly. By that time I was not even flying. I was flying a Free-X Oxygen. It was a higher performance glider, which was very nice. But in some moment, Free-X threw out a warning that the lines were defect and that needed to be replaced. So in Venezuela, I had about 4 friends with the same glider that broke the lines. Fortunately, nothing happened, and I was warned before. And I received from Free-X the replacement lines. So I said, oh, I'm going to change them in some moment. And then in some flights said, just a tiny little set, and okay, the line started breaking.
In the middle of the SAT.
In the middle of the SAT, it's like, oh shit! And we were flying above vineyards, and I always flying above vineyards. Remember the stories of my French instructor, my French teacher at school. He was with the parachutist. He said that his colleague died impaled by landing with a parachute above a vineyard. It's like I'm never going to be throwing a reserve chute in this place. So in that moment I said I'm not going to throw a reserve chute. So the glider was still halfway flying, and I managed to bring it somehow to a grassy area. It was between Stall and well, I get 2 compressed vertebrae because of that. But yeah. But yes, that was my beginnings of acro. And when I started working for Firebird, I didn't see myself as an acro pilot. It was only the first my boss in that time he like started like supporting me. It's like, Tommy, there is an expo in Voss in Norway. And would you like to go there with all the demos and be our representative there? It's like, yeah, for sure. Let's go to Norway. And then I heard, oh, there's this competition where they drop out of the helicopter. Mm-hmm. And my boss, do you want to fly there, Tommy, with the F-18, the F, because we want to have it more in the competition. Like, Kev, I don't even know how to do a helicopter. I don't consider myself like an acro pilot to be entering a competition of this level. Said, no, don't worry, just go in. But it's like, I would love to drop out of an helicopter. Don't get me wrong. It's like, but I'm not sure I will be representing the brand. No, just go. Okay, that's fine. And so that's how I arrived there. And I was so excited to be, oh my God, dropping out of the helicopter. That was, and there were several runs. So each run would be dropping. It was not only once, it was what it was going to be. So that's where over there I met the Rodriguez guys, Horacio and Hernán, and there was also Fabulman, also from Mexico, who happens to be a Venezuelan as well. So it was cool to meet all the. And well, the competition started, and the days before, I just started practicing a helicopter, and it was so easy with that glider. The glider made it easy to do the stuff. So I said, oh, why not? Okay. And the runs went, I made the competition, and it was not that bad. My result was not too shabby. I was like, okay, I'm gonna start practicing, and then that's how I started doing more of the competitions that year. That was back in 2003, and it didn't go too bad in the end. I think I finished, if I'm not mistaken, I finished 7th on the Vertigo and 9th overall in the world ranking. So it was like, oh, I didn't. But I I started training a lot more after that Norway competition. And so I was in Füssen also with the same problem in Germany, that acrobatics is forbidden. But I somehow did it without wanting to get in problems with people. And my friend was always the radical one, and he somehow always got in problems. We were like flying buddies because we were helping each other. He was filming me, and that, okay, we did this wrong. And I think when you have your body and you help each other to grow in that. And yeah, those were my early days in acro. So I after that I came to Venezuela, and with that little glider, it was not like really nice to fly, to gain altitude, and I slowly stopped doing acro eventually. And people like to say, no, Tommy's an acro pilot. No, I used to be an acro pilot.
I've been trying for years.
Yeah, Alex is trying
to get it upside down. Every time I see Tommy, I'm like, you want to fly an Emily for a bit?
Yeah.
It's really funny to me that on one side nowadays, acro is so respected by the community of pilots because everybody recognizes how important it is for control and safety.
It's not a crime. I've got a stick on my laptop. Acro is not a crime. It's not a crime, Alex.
But it's still a crime by the establishment. So when I was starting out, I mean, Miraflores in Lima is a super public flying site. It's public because it's in front of the whole city. If something happens, everybody whips out their cell phones and they'll film it immediately. It's on the news. And there is a community of pilots sitting on the ground watching what other people are doing. And so for the first 7 years of my flying, people are like, you're going to kill yourself. You are going to ruin the sport for everybody. Stop doing what you're doing. You're never going to make a living out of acro. And it really was only until I somehow made my way to Europe that I realized, oh, wow, not only is there a bunch of people doing the things that I'm doing, but I'm like the tamest of all these wild monkeys. I'm super conservative, actually. I learned very step by step. I've met people who threw 8 rescues in the first year. Let's knock on some wood, but I'm still to throw a rescue. And it's been a while. So it's interesting to watch how different flying sites handle acro. But by now, everybody's recognizing the importance of acro and freestyle and control. And this is one of the things we want to bring to the overall flying community. And that's why Peru is so important. Because these coastal flying sites are the perfect playground to develop all kinds of skills. And we've seen it in our group this time. We've seen an amazing progression from every single one of the participants in confidence, in launching, in a wide range of wind conditions, and just being more in touch with the equipment. Because I am 100% convinced that if you are flying, that weight under that self-stabilizing pendulum that is our paraglider keeps us stable. If you're on the ground, it's way more unstable. There isn't that weight hanging there to stabilize the pendulum. And so in 2 hours of ground handling, you make 4,000 hand movements. In 2 hours of flying, you make a few hundred, I'm going to say, if you just fly nice and chill.
Yeah, makes sense. And you know, it's clearly all of that kind of practice. I've seen you on your Enzo, you know, I've seen you flying the top end gliders. You have to fly if you want to compete at the top level. And when you see people with the ultimate glider control, that transfers onto whatever glider you're flying, whether you guys are flying the tandems, whether you're flying your play glide, you know, your player back gliders, or whether you're flying your competition gliders. That level of glider control and understanding. A glider mechanically can only move in so many different ways. It's only physically possible for it to go back, forward, side to side, diagonally. There's not that many other ways that a glider can move. And once you start to understand what all those movements are and how to control it, it opens up a whole, you know, new box of confidence. Whatever the glider is doing, it becomes information. It's not movements anymore. It's all information.
Yeah, and gliders give a bunch of subtle information that people really choose maybe unconsciously to filter. If you're just flying through the air, you sometimes just interpret that movement as, okay, it's moving around, fine, it's not doing anything useful or anything bad. But when you're on the ground, those movements are exactly what you're trying to control on the ground, because once again, that lack of stability on the ground means many times that those movements will make your glider fall back down or fall off too much to one side. And when you get in touch with your glider and you know that range of movement and you know how important it is to be aware of this information and take cues from it, in the air, it totally transforms your flying.
Yeah. And what was really lovely when we went down to Paracas, and I have to say, for anyone listening, Paracas, for me, is one of the best places to practice that kind of stuff, to practice ground handling, taking off, top landing, general soaring skills, close to the hill. I've never come... It's like a smaller version of Dune de Pila, 10 times better for me. It's incredible. And what was lovely watching you guys down there when we were there a week ago is you guys still have such a passion. I mean, you've been flying from a really early stage. You've been flying. When did you start?
I started when I was 15, so let's say end of 2010, beginning 2011.
Yeah. And you guys still have such a passion for it.
It's just getting better. It just keeps getting better and better.
Exactly.
There's the realization that you're a beginner.
Yeah.
Even after all these years, once you start opening your eyes to everything that is out there to do with flying, I was never so motivated, and I never felt like such a beginner.
Yeah. And how do you manage? So we were talking about Tommy, you being in the aqua competitions and what have you. Now, when you do PWC, how do you deal with the pressure of flying in PWC? What people I don't think realise, because they see the nice Instagram posts of all the gliders looking beautiful on glide, there's so much travelling involved. You're flying day after day after day under quite precious situations for massively long periods of time per day. How do you deal with that? Fitness-wise, mentally-wise?
Well, you can see how I deal with it by my results, which have not been great.
They've not been bad either.
They've not been terrible, but they haven't been great. The mental aspect is a huge part of it. The mental aspect is definitely a huge part of it. I have no issue with the traveling. It's actually kind of what got me into doing the competitions. It's a very good excuse to travel the world and meet a bunch of cool people and make useful contacts, which is always in the back of my mind. For, to survive in this world of paragliding, you need to make a bunch of contacts. And like any business, really, it's not about how hard you work, it's about who you know. Mm-hmm. So before that sounds a bit opportunistic, it's really about the friendships.
It's absolutely true. In the end. We met. We became really good friends. Yeah. We sat down one day, we started talking about Peru, and now we're here, and we're just coming to the end of a 2-week, for me, a phenomenal tour around Peru.
And going back to performance in competitions, it's really about the mental game. It's really about not letting your emotions take control of your flying, and that I think is my biggest weakness. As soon as I see an opening, the blood red curtain goes over my eyes and I just go full bar, and then I'm in front and I'm alone. And since I'm not really a cross-country pilot, I'm lost in the front, and I obviously end up either having to catch up or bombing out, and you see it in the results. But in the end, I'm fairly new to competition flying. There's a lot to explore there, especially with hike and fly competitions, which are something that's a big motivation at the moment. So it's my next, probably the next door for me to open right now. Having control of that mental aspect, I think, is the key to competitions. And the world's best competition pilots, the French, they study the mental part. They have a coach. They have somebody, they actually helping them develop this strategic thinking and this controlling their emotions and controlling the situation and situational awareness that beginners to competitions might sometimes struggle with. And people with analytical personalities will have this more naturally than people who are totally ADHD like me.
Yeah. And it's a really interesting thing you say that I agree 100%. It's a really tactical, it's a game of chess. It's a game of aerial chess. And I think sometimes people don't quite realise it's not just getting a thermal and pushing out in front and leading the way and taking kind of suicide glides and catching that last 50-foot thermal. It's a really strategic game.
I mean, it's become a little bit of a game of seeing who can assume the controlling position best. So just be on top of the stack and let everybody make some moves for them and control and anyways take those leading points. And then make your break at the end, or just stay back and control and never be on the podium any single day, but just be close enough every single day that you're on the podium by the end of it when other people have made mistakes and you haven't.
Yeah.
And that, in some ways, it's kind of sad. I feel like there is a certain glory to that one guy who makes a break for it after turn point 1 and is standing in goal 15 minutes before everybody. There is a certain goal to Yassen style.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a cool thing, but it's very rare. And I think that's the ultimate goal of a cross-country competition pilot, is being that guy that makes an amazing break for it and just leaves everybody with their mouths open, like, where did he go? Why is he standing in goal? Why is he already taken off his gear and is eating a sandwich?
Yeah.
Because the times to goal nowadays, people are arriving in goal within half seconds of each other. So anybody who is there widely before the whole group, that's a monumental
You've got to have respect, for being able to do that. And for the budding up and coming cross-country pilots that are listening to this, what would be your advice? I mean, we have a lot of talented cross-country pilots starting to come through in the UK system. In the world in general, paragliding is expanding hugely. So for up and coming, whether it's amateur cross-country pilots or pilots that want to get more into the comp scene, do you have any kind of advice for them of how to progress, how to approach it?
I'm an amateur comp pilot, and I think getting into competitions was a really good motivation for learning to fly cross country, for learning to recognize signs in the air of how real flying actually works. And I do think that a background in acro and SIV is definitely beneficial, and competitions are also on the other side a really, really good way for accelerated learning. I mean, you will learn a lot during a day of cross country flying, but you might learn twice as much if you have the healthy pressure of a group kind of showing you the way or dragging you along.
Yeah. And there are a lot more now kind of amateur, base level, intermediate level competitions that are starting. The Gym Wide Open, the Navita, the BGD Weightless.
Sports racing series nowadays.
Exactly. So it's becoming more accessible now. There are easier ways for pilots to get into it. I mean, I don't know if that existed when you were coming up through the competition scene. Did you have that luxury of being able to enter these smaller comps before you got into the PWC?
I skipped a ton of steps, which was maybe a bad thing, because I skipped the steps of having to take proper decisions on a glider with lesser performance, and I'm feeling that now. I somehow made 2 years ago when I started competing, I somehow made my way into a fairly high level competition, into the Colombian Open. Immediately afterwards into the British Open, even higher level. And those were right before the Columbia PWC, which I obviously did not get into. But it wasn't long. It was 6 months later, after my first comp, that I made it into the Macedonia PWC. So to anybody looking to get into comps, maybe don't skip those steps, because it'll bring a ton of frustration later. I'm feeling it by now. You know, it might not be a bad move to actually do some comps on a sea glider and have to actually make proper choices and not have that magic wand of, okay, this thing will glide 65 kilometers per hour against wind and it'll all be fine.
Yeah, very interesting point. And for you guys to be able to, like myself as well, to be able to stay in the sport, make it a profession. It's not the easiest sport in the world to make your life job or career, as it were. So as me, I mean, I met you guys in the tandem team. You guys fly tandems. It's great. I mean, you're both such amazing persons. If that makes any sense. As we've seen with the group that we've had the last 2 weeks. How did you both get into the tandem flying scene? Where did that come from?
Well, after coming back from the Firebird job to Venezuela, I brought along my first tandem. I said, I want to do this. I want to fly people, and that's how it started. I can earn some money, some extra money with it. I was doing my other tours in Venezuela, and somehow the demand started growing for that. And okay, let's make a tandem operation, and that's how we developed. It was part of the business more there in Venezuela to have also tandem flights. So we grew up the tandem team, and we're going a lot to fly to La Victoria, which is a close side to Caracas, and that's how it came up with the tandem. And then here in Peru, it was funny because flying in Lima is so easy, it's simple. And you've got a lot of assistance. You get called to come to fly, and the wind is in. Come over. You have assistants that bring your equipment. You just arrive.
You have what?
You have assistants.
We used to,
we used to. Yeah. And it's so funny because you get spoiled, or the pilots get so spoiled because you have assistants that dress your passenger and make him ready to fly, assist you on taking off. And land,
waiting for you at the landing to catch you and drop your glider.
And it's
very
so
easy to be complacent.
Yeah, and it's so funny because in my first experience, like, oh my god, these are divas here. They're you get easily spoiled here. Yeah. It's like, there's like busy days with a lot of passengers. The pilots would scream like, "Hey, where's my assistant? My passenger isn't getting dressed." Like, come on, dress your own passenger. And but here working here as a tandem pilot, it's has been easy. It's like you just arrive. In comparison to now flying a lot in Europe, you have to take a cable car up. You have to unpack the glider again. You fly down. You pack the glider.
Clip in your own passenger.
Clip in your own. Oh my god!
Tricky stuff, man. Tricky stuff, I tell you.
And something funny, when I started flying again in Europe, I came from the Peruvian school of stronger wind takeoffs and dealing with more wind than usual in the mountains. And it was funny in Görlitz, and one day we were like, the wind was strong, and the wind is too strong. It's like, you're kidding me. It's like I'm more scared. I'm more scared of taking off like you do with no wind or nil or slight backwind. It's like the whole. It's so funny. The whole thing is like I'm scared of taking off with no wind, and they're scared of taking off with that wind. It's like, and it's so funny that this whole thing, you're used to flying in a particular way, and then. That was the funny impression of the different flying sites.
It becomes totally relevant to where you fly. You become very comfortable in your own flight.
That's why it's so important to get out there and travel.
Yeah.
It's so important. Every single flying site has its particularities. I am terrified of taking off with tailwind. We do it all the time. In winter, we take off with a ton of tailwind or zero wind. Yeah. And in the end, it's become normal. But my very first zero wind takeoffs with a tandem or with anything actually were in Austria, and that's the key to keeping motivation fresh, and that's the key to keeping your skills up to date. It's really getting out there and getting slightly out of your comfort zone. And with the proper guidance, you can be led out of your comfort zone within a good box of safety without it necessarily having to take it too far and stepping over that invisible line that you don't know where to place and say, okay, my comfort zone reaches until here, and past there, it's danger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so that's something I've been impressed with the two of you as we've been working together in Peru, is your focus on safety, on improving, but safety, improving at the right rate, not pushing yourself too far, but pushing yourself, allowing yourself to progress. You have to push yourself a little bit. You have to get over those fear barriers. And on the back of that, you two have now formed, I mean, what's your company name?
Autana.
Autana. Where did that come from?
It actually comes from Venezuela. It's the name of a tabletop mountain in the Amazon. It's a particular one, and the name is of indigenous origin, and it's the Tree of Life. It's
very mystic.
Very yes, so powerful.
So powerful.
There we go. It had to happen.
Of course.
So when Tommy arrived in Peru in 2013, and I looked up to him and saw Max Steel, my action model, my role model in life, he needed somebody to register Autana here in Peru, and I was just of legal age, and that is just how I accepted that we were gonna end up working together, and end up working under this company name as well.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you guys, you're the perfect fit because of the wealth of experience you have. With your attitude as well, you both have the same attitude towards the progression, the safety, and much more than that. Like this tour's been wonderful flying wise, but we've been on the dune buggies going into Huacachina, the food, the gastronomical.
Oh my
tour
God,
the food in Peru. Oh. I mean, we're all coming down for breakfast every morning, the entire group. No one's really having breakfast anymore. We're still so full from the night before that it's a coffee, maybe a piece of pineapple, and that's it. I mean, what you guys do, it's not just about the flying, is it? It's about the cultural experience. It's about getting to know the country. What are your plans? Where are you taking it from here? I mean, Peru, you've definitely opened the door to Peru. Already there are a lot of groups, there's American groups that are now looking to book with you to come over here. For sure, we'll be back next year. And you've really kind of lifted the lid on this hidden gem. What else is in your plans? Where do you guys go from here?
I think we'd like to launch a few more guided cross-country tours, more leaning towards that side of things. Maybe some in Europe, maybe some on this continent. We're not going to release too much information before it becomes readily available publicly. No, we have a few ideas cooking on the back burner, and I think we're going to have some great stuff coming soon.
Some gems also.
And again, I will not give any of the secret away, but one of the problems that we've got, and I'm really facing, is how busy flying sites are getting. So I've been doing the repetitive tours every year. I go to Colombia every year. It's become a tradition. I live in a place called Aguadenales in Spain, and unfortunately, but people say, why don't you do more groups in Aguadenales, my own village where I live? It's become too busy. It's 120, 150, 130. There's been a couple of mid-air collisions in my village this week while I've been here. Colombia is getting so busy. Competitions, and I love competitions, but they're starting to take over. We're starting to lose launches. We can't use them anymore because there's a competition. The next week there's another one. The next week there's another one. You're turning up on takeoffs now where there's 100, 200, 250 pilots. The air and the launch isn't getting any bigger, but while the sport's expanding, these very popular places, the Anises, the Columbias, are becoming a little bit overcrowded. And what I love is you guys have the same attitude as me. Is the world's a really big place. And some of the places that I know you've been looking into, that you're starting to think about, are incredibly exciting new destinations where at the moment there aren't the flocks and flocks of pilots that are going back year after year. And I think what's great with you guys is you're going to open up a lot of places, incredibly exciting places to visit. There is a lot of potentially fantastic paragliding out there, hasn't been discovered yet, that you guys are kind of out there discovering.
Yeah, there's a definite niche for finding new flying sites, or even just recognizing flying sites that have always been there, but not very much in the eye of attention of international pilots. There's so much potential out there for really exploiting these spots and doing it respectfully, like allowing the locals to take a role in this growth and valuing their participation and all the work they've done to develop the flying site, the flying techniques, the routes. So definitely a hand-in-hand collaboration with the locals who are there and have been the pioneers of the sport in their spot is very much a high priority.
Yeah. And your future plans, if you're into flying, I mean, we'll be back in Europe next year, no doubt, doing the tandems, and you're going to continue, Alex, with the PWC?
I would like to do a lot more competitions. It's complicated time-wise, it's complicated financially. It's a huge investment to take part in competitions. It means a lot of traveling. It means being up-to-date on gear. Unfortunately, if you don't have brand new up-to-date gear, it's sometimes hard to keep up. We're not back in the days where somebody could make a stunning move on a sea glider in the midst of a bunch of open-class gliders and still win a comp. Nowadays, the level is very high, and it's gotten to the point that the latest equipment will make a difference. And sometimes the latest equipment compromises on the sustainability of the sport, I feel like some of the new generation of harnesses are so inconvenient and so uncomfortable, and there's a personal opinion, but maybe in some situations even downright dangerous. So there is that to be taken into account for high-level cross-country competition. Nowadays, I feel like I'm gravitating towards bivouac flying. I feel like that's the ultimate goal for me. Hike and fly racing. I was never an athlete, and as I've been discovering that side of this passion for flying, it's been super rewarding.
And Tommy, you're now working with UP.
Yes.
Doing some promotion stuff, some testing stuff. I mean, you've been a test pilot from the very early days. So what you must have seen. So you said at the beginning of the podcast, even back in those days, we have hit the maximum performance you could ever do on a paraglider. And now we're 25 years on, and we're still saying the same things. You must have seen an incredible progression curve on gliders from when you were testing back in the really pioneering days to what you're testing now.
I'm right now I'm not testing anything. I'm basically, for UP, I'm in charge of South America, Central America, Spain, the Spanish / Portuguese speaking markets. And I've just recently begun taking care of the social media as well, and doing some footage, filming, and creating content for them.
Yeah.
So yes, that's for now. I've just begun working with them, and I'm trying to develop that also a little bit more again here in Europe. There in Europe because I'm living now in Europe. To develop a little bit more into photography, video making, drone filming, as well as doing more paragliding and trip related stuff. So we're expanding we want to make more of the trips. Of course, tandem flying is also always fun. Flying the seasons together with friends. That is always something nice to go back and share with like we have done. This year I wasn't able to share with you both in Gallitzin, but but then again we were able to join here and goof around still on our trip. So that's more or less what it's looking at.
And I've got to give you a shout out for your drone footage. So,
the level of production that Tommy is capable of, video and photography, is stunning. For those out there, definitely check out. This is some free promotion. Definitely check out the stuff we're gonna post about our tour and Tommy's own work with UP, the level is some of the highest we've ever seen in paragliding.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, we will have a movie of our Peru trip coming out in a couple of weeks or within a month or whatever it is, and it's sensational. And you do some work with different companies. You can do. I mean, if someone needs a drone pilot to take stuff, you're available to do it.
Of course, yeah.
Another side of the business.
Yeah.
I've blown my socks off, honestly. These last 2 weeks, it's an incredible talent you have, and it gives a totally new perspective when you see the drone shots, especially with the eye that you have. Waving GoPros around, having the 360 cam is okay, but when you've got someone taking the shots that you let you do it, it's incredible. I would recommend everyone to have a look at the footage you've already put out, the movie that's coming, and just to generally have a look at Tommy's movie reels. You have some incredible stuff out there.
Thank you.
And the sites that we've known to that we've come to know and love in Peru, some of them are just wildly beautiful.
Yes.
Some of the drone shots we've made in the Paracas Natural Reserve, that place is otherworldly. The surface of Mars hitting the ocean.
I mean, before we wrap it up, we've got to wrap it up because we're off flying in a moment. But just tell us about the outline of the Peru trip, where we start, where we go.
So the idea of the Peru trip was just to give an overview of these coastal flying sites that we have in proximity to Lima. People will land in Lima. They will arrive the first thing. On the first day, they'll just get settled in this ridiculous metropolis of a city. It's a city of 11 million people. And as soon as you arrive, you get hit in the face with Peruvian food, which is next to Mexican and Thai, I'm going to say the best food on the planet.
I'm going to agree with that.
It has nothing to envy of any world cuisine. It's been named by World Travel Awards Best Culinary Destination 8 years in a row, which is just, okay, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe I'm wrong there, but it's just ridiculous. Maybe a couple days of flying in Lima to see those iconic high-rise buildings on the coast, and then we take it down on a bit of a 4x4 expedition 300 kilometers down the coast to Paracas. It's a protected natural desert reserve where, apart from the world's best seafood and constant wind, there is a bunch of landscapes that are just unlike anything on the planet. This is a very arid desert. It's very dramatic in contrast to what we're used to in Europe, in the Alps. It's all sand, rocks, and of every color you can imagine, and meeting the ocean right there, it's a natural beauty of extreme wildness. And the fact that it has such consistent flying conditions and consistent conditions also for kite surfing and windsurfing and sailing makes it an ideal spot to perfect our skills on the ground. Every day, like on cue, the wind switches on and it slowly rises to its maximum, and during that curve of wind speeds, there are a bunch of skills to be learned at both ends, at both the lower soaring end, scratching around, proximity flying, all the way to the high end of okay, I need to control my glider before it becomes a beast.
Yeah, it's like flying on Mars or Tatooine. That we go with.
It really is. I'm expecting to see TIE fighters and C-3PO.
Yeah, exactly.
As we do our 4x4 expedition through the reserve to see some of the sites, you just expect to see Jabba the Hutt's palace.
Exactly.
Every sunset there might be 5 moons coming down.
I mean, I have to say, we've got to wrap it up, but I have to say, I want to thank you on behalf of myself and the group for allowing us to be part of this. You boys have opened up something incredibly special here. And it's super exciting to have a new destination on the map. There's still so much to explore. You know, we need to spend a month or 2 months here really to actually be able to fit in everything available to see, do, eat, smell. Incredible place. So well done, gentlemen. We've got good fun. I'm going to take a group out. And where are we going today?
We're going to Pachacamac. That's our local mountain site. It's about a 45-minute drive out from Lima. And it's just going to be local flying to close off our tour. We've just had 4 days of flying in Lima. Luckily, beautiful conditions soaring at the coast. Mostly everybody's had wonderful top landings, lovely light. The sunsets at the coast here are spectacular. Lima is a city that is enveloped by cloud or has pretty interesting cloud formations most of the year, and that means the sunsets are otherworldly with all shades of orange and purple. So we had some really, really beautiful flying in the afternoons. And it's not the simplest flying site. It demands a fair bit of skill and decision making, especially for the top landing. It's a top landing fully in venturi, not compression, as we've learned. So it means that you have to come in low enough, but not too low. And it has a series of unique phenomena that make it a really good spot for practicing.
Gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Love it. And hopefully we can do a part 2.
Okay.
and see where else we end up around South America and the world.
Yeah, we'd better start driving, because otherwise
we have to walk. And there we have it. What a cracker. Great pair of lads, though. Really interesting podcast. I really enjoyed recording that one with them and making that our first episode in season 3. So we are off for 2024 season 3. We will be along with episode 2 very shortly. I'm not going to give anything away, but we have some incredibly entertaining content coming your way. Slightly different format. We're going to have some mini series, mini podcasts, a little spin-off from the main paragliding debrief. We're going to be talking to Theo de Blick, we're going to be talking to Kevin Phillips, and a lot of other big names, but I'm not going to give too much away yet. You're going to have to sit back and wait and see. However, it won't be long. I will be in touch very, very soon. I really thank everybody for listening, and again, I really thank everyone for the support we've had with these. I can't thank you enough. It's been amazing. The response we're getting to these is incredible. Going to keep working as hard as we can to improve it, to improve the quality, and to make sure we continue to get the biggest names in paragliding to come and share their paragliding stories. In the meantime, we hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will catch you again very soon for the Paragliding Debrief.